Next item on the agenda is a presentation from New College. Proviso from the General Appropriations Act this year requires New College to develop a business plan that describes the institution's long-term student enrollment goals and how it will use state funding to achieve those goals. The plan must include detailed descriptions of specific strategies, certain initiatives, and other steps the institution will take over the next 5 years to increase student enrollment, which has already begun. The state is holding $15 million in reserve pending approval of the business plan. If we approve the plan today, board staff on behalf of New College will request release of these funds from the state. In addition, the board on behalf of New College must submit quarterly status reports to the legislature and to the governor. The proviso is included in your materials and it's very detailed. I know our staff has been working with New College to ensure that all requirements of the proviso are included in the business plan. So with that background information, I'll turn it over to President Corcoran to present his plan. President Corcoran.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. We put together a PowerPoint presentation. The first part I put in it was basically because it's something that comes up all the time, and part of the proviso language is there value to a liberal arts education? Is it wanted? Is it needed to have a world-class liberal arts institution in a repertoire of 12 universities at university in the state of Florida? Because de facto, if you say yes, there's value to that liberal arts education, de facto you're saying that the cost per student is going to be exorbitantly more than the larger scale universities. The average liberal arts school is about $2,000, your average university is $33,000. So you're going to have a massive difference in those costs. But that's for the policymakers. Obviously in our strategic plan we address that. We go into the history of the liberal arts, the value of the liberal arts, and we summarized it in a quote, but we just want to, obviously we believe there's tremendous value to a liberal arts education. We go through that. The difference is a force multiplier when you have a lower faculty ratio, when you don't have courses taught by TAs, when you have all of the different dynamics that are force multipliers in giving that education to a liberal arts student. So I just put that out there. Obviously, it's in the business plan, and you can read it in more detail. What I wanted to do really quickly was give or take the 16 months since the governor replaced the board, put in new people, what has happened, and the big successes. Obviously the biggest is in 63-year history, the school has never even come close to a 300 student enrollment. We have back-to-back 300 student enrollments. We broke the record last year, we broke it again this year. In addition to that, we're seeing our SAT scores going up by almost 20 points. So we're on that trajectory to being a world-class liberal arts school, and more detail of that is in the business plan. We've hired over 40 new faculty members. These faculty members are just elite from around the country and the world. We have Oxford professors, Chicago professors, Ivy League professors who are all flocking here, in part because they say if you truly are going to be an institution where there's absolute academic freedom, count me in. We established a presidential scholar in residence, and we're attracting Dr. Stanley Fish, a renowned person who does work here with the Board of Governors. These folks are saying, hey, I'd like to have time at New College in addition to all the other things that they've done in their history of academic excellence. We initiated the new core curriculum where we're taking that Steve Jobs, the merger of the technology and the liberal arts. We'll have that before the Board of Governors in short order, but that gives everybody the opportunity. Not only do you know how to wrestle with those great questions and critically think and have the soft skills, you also have that technate that allows you to go out and be immediately employable in the market. We created the first marine mammal science master's program, also grows our enrollment. We've debuted the Socratic stage. Our Socratic stage, last year was the embryonic year, now we're in year 2. We just had our first event. We had over 1,200 individuals pack the Opera House. It was a debate on can science change the world. We had Bill Nye versus Michael Schellenberger. It'll ultimately be online. It was very tense at moments, but it was a fantastic debate, and probably half the audience were high school students and college students from around the greater area, from Orlando to Tampa down to Sarasota. But if you look in the strategic plan, you can see the lineup of additional debates. We have Congressman Donalds and a host of excellent historians on race relations in the United States doing a debate on where we are in race relations. We're taking every controversial topic from Hamas and Israel to race relations to gender studies. Next, as you know, we have 12 sports teams. The sports programs have been excellent. We got into the NAIA in less than 6 months, which was a record for the NAIA as far as I know. The sports teams are going fantastic. They're growing, and they're succeeding in the program that we have. We take, as I've said numerous times, we took our deferred maintenance from 75%, down 75%. We were at about $68 million. And all the universities get their deferred maintenance by the same Gordian recommendation. Ours was at 60 million, 68 million. We're down to about 22 million. In addition, we have $10 million in campus enhancements, which has really helped with our student enrollment growth. 60% increase on our new college foundation. The new college foundation, for the 5 years previous of the 5 of the 6 previous years, before Governor DeSantis made a change, they lost money in operating revenue, almost $10 million. Just from the 18 months, we went from a $42 million foundation to up $5 million to almost $47 million. And we did that by, number one, everyone that was in the foundation no longer works there. It's an entirely new crew, and we are saving $1 million in overhead just in operational expenses. We took our spend rate from 5.5% to 3.5%, saving almost another $1 million. And we redid our entire investment strategy, and that investment strategy has allowed us to have a much more successful year in the market in our investments. And take that in consideration, I think a year prior to the governor getting there, that year, we lost $7 million in our foundation. So all of that has been completely overhauled. And in addition to that, 60% of our donors in this 18 months are new donors who've never given to the college. We're starting to attract nationwide donors who really want to have a liberal arts university that is not engaged in any shape and form in indoctrination. We've got a brand new food service vendor. We acquired 9 acres from the county, which we're going to ultimately develop. We were the first in the country, probably, we believe, that got rid of a DEI offices, and also discontinued our gender studies AOCs or degrees. We executed more articulation agreements with 14 different state colleges. That has just taken our transfer enrollment and almost tripled it in size. We've increased the amount of Black and Hispanic students. In year 1, we were up 300% in Black students, 100% in Hispanic students, which just showed you the absolute fallacy of DEI. There was no diversity on that campus until Governor DeSantis made the changes with the new board. Now there's tremendous growth in our diversity. We increased our student retention by 11%. It's probably one of the bigger factors. We were down as low as 65%. We're at 76% this year. But that's, and the reasons for that, the number one reasons for the lack of retention in years past, when we surveyed the students, the top answers were, it's a cancel culture, it's toxic, I can't find any friends, I've been picked on and bullied. We have pretty much eliminated that toxicity on the campus altogether. Now the reasons for it being a little bit different is because they'll say you don't have, we call them AOCs instead of degrees, but you don't have this AOC, I'd like to have this AOC, I'd like to have more course offerings. Those are easily solvable. We hire more faculty, we add these AOCs, that as long as they're in line with our mission, and we'll see that retention rate go up even greater. And then I added at the last, I totally agree with Governor Oliva. I didn't even want to put it up there, but I put it up there because it does matter. As Governor Jones said, there's reasons for these. But you know, even I call the Princeton Review, I call the Washington Monthly, and I go, hey, why are our numbers here or there? And I find out that they're taking numbers from 2012 or 2014 or 20. It's just like this isn't real. And the reason I called is because they said that our Pell Grant numbers were down, where our Pell Grant numbers have just gone up tremendously with the advent of our sports programs. And so, but they're like, oh, we won't even see your numbers for 5 years. But regardless, we're up in the rankings and numerous things. In fact, we just got ranked by the Heritage Foundation in the state of Florida, one of only 2 schools to go to if you want true academic freedom and true opportunities for success afterwards. In the business plan, we broke it down into 7 fundamental aspirations: attract students with broad intellectual curiosity, encourage civil discourse, strengthen the core curriculum, establish high participation in sports and cultural programs, create vibrant student life and top-tier housing, recruit faculty dedicated to teaching and mentoring students, and ensure financial soundness, the last one pretty much being a derivative of the first 6. And then we broke those 7 into just the main 6 action plans. And then before you is a spreadsheet working with the BOG, where we took the action plans, then we said, okay, here's what we're going to do in those action plans, and then we have a quarterly checkoff with the Board of Governors heretofore for those funds. I just did want you guys, I do want to see, like, the numbers we've submitted to you guys. We're already about 100 over where we said we would be. So in theory, we should be at the 2028 number by 2020, the 2026 year or 27 year. But you can see we're already at the all-time peak, give or take, not only did we have the two largest enrollment classes in the history of New College, 63 years, we're already at the top, pretty much all-time great, biggest number. And so at about 873. So I would just say, as a state of New College in 18 months, it has been a wonderful transformation led by a wonderful board of trustees and a great staff that has been brought on. And we're very proud of the direction we are, the direction we're heading. And I think that as the legislature and all their prerogative wanted us to have something that has never been done in the history of the university systems, this accountability process, we're more than willing to comply with it because we feel like we'll outkick our coverage in terms of the results.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to, first of all, congratulations on the results you've already had so far. I want to open it up. Is there any questions by any member of the committee or Board of Governors? Eric, did you?
Yes.
Okay.
So, first off, I appreciate all the data and the information that was put into the plan. A business plan, right, is designed to provide an institution a roadmap of where they want to go, the aspirations, but importantly also what's the costs, what's the financing plan, what are going to be the needs going forward. Specifically, that's what the legislature wanted and asked us to make sure a business plan was put forward. I went through the business plan a number of times, and I found it had a lot of good information on the aspirations, and frankly, I was a little concerned with some of the roadmap on the financing, given where the costs are. We spent a lot of time yesterday in the strategic discussions around making sure that, and Governor Jones talked about this morning, about making sure that we're all being very thoughtful about the use of taxpayer dollars on what it costs to, in this case, remain number one as a system, but making sure that we're also being good stewards of taxpayer dollars in that process. So with that in mind, I've got a few questions, and I just want to kind of go through and understand what your thinking is on this. I hear you loud and clear on the fact that in your opinion, a liberal arts college is more expensive than other schools. Although I will tell you that I don't think, by definition, to be a really good liberal arts school, you have to be small. There are plenty of great liberal arts colleges embedded in larger universities. I have a liberal arts degree from my undergrad, and I went to University of Texas, not a small institution. But I understand you're going to have economies of scale. You have an idea of how much right now we're spending based on the last appropriations per student at NCF and college?
That was submitted to you in the package, Governor Szilagyi.
Okay, I didn't see it in your package, but I did do the math. It's over $91,000 a student based on fiscal 23-24 appropriations that New College got and the number of folks you had enrolled. So I went and looked at what does that compare to every other university. Our system average is $10,000 a student. The UCF actually gets a prize for the lowest at $6,000 a student. Economies of scale matter, I'll give you that. Poly, which I think is a good benchmark, is half of what New College is per student. And that is before we take into account that this business plan is requesting $206 million, or planning on getting $206 million incremental over the next 5 years. And so I have to sit back and ask, is that really, we're looking at releasing $15 million here, which puts us on a course. It says this business plan, which says I need $206 million, assuming, by the way, that everything comes in on budget, is good money for us to be spending. I mean, on an equivalent basis, we're here at USF. If I look at that on an equivalent basis, and maybe I'm not looking at this right, so push back, please. But that's the equivalent of USF asking for $13 billion in 5 years. Not 20-year program, in 5 years. And so I want us to be really thoughtful about, if we approve this strategic plan, that we're understanding that we're putting, we're taking a path that is going to end up locking in what is currently a cost structure that is exponentially more expensive than every single other university we have in our system. And I think it's interesting what you've done exactly on the sports programs as an example, but you spent a lot of time in the deck talking about sports. I always viewed New College as the honors college. And believe me, I am a fan of student athletes. I'm the father of a student athlete. And I think it's amazing what student athletes can do. But the expansion of sports teams going from, currently I think it's 12, I believe your goal is 24 sports teams by 2028, and then 30 sports teams by 2034, if I remember correctly. Your goal is to have 36% of your student body at the honors college be student athletes. Now, at every other school that I'm aware of, that is not even close to being in the same realm. I mean, I'm going to ask others here to correct me, but I bet Maury knows, and I bet at UF, it's 1% of your student body are student athletes. I'd say the same thing at Florida State. 500-600 of your students are student athletes out of 45,000. That's the average for Division I schools. That's the average, 1%. And so my concern is I want to make sure everybody has read the strategic plan, and that if you support this, okay, we're supporting the Honors College having 35% of their students be student athletes, and the $100+ million to support that goes with that. That's what we're saying. And we are supporting spending a lot more money to educate a very small number of students that already cost exponentially more of state taxpayer dollars to educate. And I personally have real concerns with that.
Governor Szilagyi, I'll let President Corcoran respond to that as well. I just want to make a couple.
I can respond if it's all right, Governor Living.
What's that?
Do you want me to respond?
In a minute.
Okay.
Couple of things I think are fair to point out. The challenge with New College and the cost per student is not a new problem. It's been there for a long time. And if you remember, there was a time not too long ago the legislature contemplated eliminating New College as a standalone college and rolling it into another university for many of the same reasons that Governor Szilagyi just articulated. I think it's important to put that in perspective. This is a problem the legislature considered, and the legislature made a decision not to do that. And that's why they put this in place. That's why they've asked us to do this and to provide these updates. I also think it's probably not fair to compare New College, and you mentioned it, because of scale, to places like UCF or University of Florida. They're very different. On the issue of athletics, so I am aware of baccalaureate colleges and liberal arts schools having a high percentage of students that are athletes. You mentioned New College would be 36%. The United States Merchant Marine Academy is 90%. The Air Force Academy is 87%. Weber International University is 80%. A lot of these, VMI, William Penn University, 70%. It's not unusual for a small school to have a high percentage of students participating in intercollegiate athletics. I don't think that you were honing in on that issue as a larger issue.
My point is that where we want the focus to be? Because in the strategic plan, there's a request for $100 million for sports facilities when, New College is the honors college for the state system. And if the answer is yes, okay, that's
well,
great. I just want to make sure
No, that remains to be seen.
That's part of it.
That remains to be seen. We haven't decided that yet, but I think it's important when we're considering the plan to consider it in the context that there was a decision not to move in a different direction related to New College, to invest in New College into growth. And I think you're right, it is expensive, but that's a policy decision at two levels. One for the legislature to make, which they did, and then the other is whether or not we want to accept the business plan, which we haven't done yet. So certainly there may be people on this committee and board that don't want to support the business plan, which is understandable for the reasons you point out. I'd like to let President Corcoran have a chance to respond, but I just think it's important to keep this in context. This is not a problem that started in the last 2 years. This is a problem that has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, so I'll just go through some of the points that you raised, Governor Szilagyi. First, I think that the scrutiny that has been on New College is long overdue and deserved. I mean, before I got there and the governor made changes, I don't recall any question, for the most part, being asked of New College by any governor when they were massively failing, massively losing money, and massively creating the most toxic culture, arguably, in the nation. But the questions are good and they're deserved. As far as sports goes, in the first required business plan that we created, again, these are all historical firsts, we put in there what the comparisons were to the greatest liberal arts colleges in the country, and we ranked them. I don't care if it's some of the smaller Ivies, if it's the little Ivies, whether it's Amherst, Williams, Haverford, you named it. We went through every single one of them. And what you find, even Princeton, all of them have sports programs, and they're elite. And all of them hover at 30 to 35% student athletes. And that was in the original business plan. So we've already addressed that. In terms of the cost per student, I just think when you're dealing with 30+ thousand universities and 2,000 liberal arts schools, I believe personally that the comparison is not appropriate, is the best way I could say it. It's inappropriate. The scale game, our foundation has, let's just say, $45 million in our foundation. Let's say University of Florida, I'm going to use a round number, has about $1 billion. Well, I take their students and divide it by their foundation. I take our students and divide it by the foundation. I say, hey, to the rest of the other 11 universities who have amazing foundations, you guys should go talk to New College, because they're at about $60,000 per student for their foundation. You guys are all down in the $20,000 per student and below. It's a silly comparison. There's no chance in the world that University of Florida should take advice for us, because we're doing some scale concept of what it is on per student raised in the foundation, when our foundation, I will say publicly, is anemic and has been anemic for decades, to the point of losing money. So the scale thing is not real in that context. It's also not real in the context that if you, again, to Governor Levine's comment, which I'll end with, but take more questions, that's a policymaker decision. That's why I opened it up with that. That is not my decision. I've been tasked to go down there as a president and turn around and make this school elite. And that's what we're doing. And we're doing it at rapid pace. But if you were to do the per student cost, also in the original business plan that we submitted, of the great liberal arts colleges from around the country, our number is $68,000. I'll be glad to sit down with you, Governor Szilagyi, and look how you came up with the $91,000 number.
I took your appropriations for 2024 divided by the number of students you had enrolled at that period of time.
I'll be glad to go through it with you. Ours is 68,000, but not saying you're wrong. Keep in mind, non-recurring money comes one year and then disappears the next year. So you could have a massive fluctuation at a small school. But if you take any of those liberal arts schools, I don't care if it's Amherst, Williams, any of them, South, North, East, or West, military academies, whoever you want to look at, we are almost half the cost of those universities per student. Almost half the cost of many of those liberal arts colleges. But at the end of the day, it's what Governor Levine said. What the legislature has said with this is that we do think to this date that we should have a premier liberal arts college, but we're tired, exhausted, and frustrated with the last 15-year history of this college. We want massive changes, and we want to know about them quarterly. So they're saying, yes, we want you. Yes, we want you to have more accountability and give it to us quarterly. Again, this has never occurred in the history of the university system. I don't mind it. We'll keep doing it because we will succeed. And I will tell you, and I'll be glad to have that debate, I'll be glad to have you to our Socratic stage, and you and I can debate on whether there's value to a liberal arts institution in the university system. I would love to do that.
So I appreciate that. Look, I don't, this is not about a debate. This is my perspective. You know, your comparisons with private liberal arts schools like Princeton, I also don't think are necessarily appropriate because those aren't taxpayer funded by Florida taxpayers. They're private schools. And when it comes down to their sports programs, they don't offer their athletes scholarships, period. They don't go and attract student athletes by saying, come to the school and we'll give you a free education. That's what we're doing. That's one of the things that we're doing. Taxpayers are subsidizing, you know, so we can have a program. If that's what we want to do, that's fine. I hear you loud and clear on what the legislature spoke about, and that is, of course, within the purview of the legislative body. But we are also constitutional officers of the state of Florida, and we are, under the Constitution, specifically tasked with, and I'll quote, ensuring the well-planned coordination and operation of the system and avoiding wasteful duplication of facilities or programs. That is our duty as members of the Board of Governors. We are tasked with that. And so all I'm saying is as we look at this, we can either say it's always been really expensive and therefore we're always going to do that, or we can go and give the legislature some insights as to whether or not there's a better way forward or not. And that's all I'm suggesting is I want to make sure. I think Florida Poly is a relevant way to look at scale. Because I have a degree in economics. I understand how scale works. Florida Poly is not much bigger from a student body perspective, and yet they're half the cost, and they're graduating engineers. Right?
I think they're 3 times the size.
Okay. Well, I thought you said you had 800 students.
We do now, but
Okay, they have
they're on pace
1,500
to be, they're on pace to be
So
2,500.
they're twice as much. But look, you and I could go back and forth on numbers. When I look at your ratio of how many administrators you have per student, you're 4 times bigger than Poly.
I don't know where
Okay.
you're getting these numbers from, Governor Szilagyi. I'll be glad to sit
let
down
me
with
do
you.
this. Let me do this.
I'm getting the numbers from the Board of Governors
You're
staff.
saying we give athletic scholarships, we don't. You're saying all kinds of things. I don't know where you're even getting it from.
Look, you've been recruiting athletes, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you spend money to recruit the athletes.
So do the other liberal arts schools.
And my only point is this. Look, I have concerns about approving a strategic plan that sets a path that says we believe it is prudent to spend another $200+ million in the next 5 years, right, at an institution that's already exponentially, no matter how you want to measure it, whether it's 2x or 10x more expensive per student to provide education. And if we as Board of Governors believe that a liberal arts education, the way that we want to do it in Florida, is worth that, that's okay. I think you should vote yes, right? But I just have concerns about that because I think the Genshaft Honors College does a great job on teaching students at the highest levels, and UF has honors programs, and everybody, has honors programs. And the question is, where's our focus?
I'm going to
Can
make
I
a
just say
couple.
one thing? I hear what you're saying, Governor Szilagyi, but 100% of your argument is a decision for the policymakers. It is even what you got, they have already made that, they've already answered all of your arguments. They could be wrong. You think they're wrong. Let me finish. You think they're wrong, But they have said, yes, we think there's value to a liberal arts institution, but we want you to submit greater accountability. And they gave the metrics of what they wanted in that accountability. What's before the Board of Governors is, did we comply with the legislative's request to come up with a quarterly report and metrics on how New College is going to succeed? That's a yes or no answer. Either we didn't submit that material or we did.
And let me stop it there. I think this has been a very healthy conversation. I want to summarize from my perspective. Number one, I think it's accurate to say that there's a lot of frustration, okay? And I think Governor Szilagyi's point about the policy issue about whether New College should exist is a question that's been asked multiple times in the legislature. Most recently, they answered the question and they funded it and they put money in the budget along with the need to do a business and accountability plan. From that perspective, it's two different issues before, but what's on the table now are two different issues. One is the policy question that Governor Szilagyi is asking, which is not an unreasonable question. And it's been said in here by President Corcoran that we may get 5 years into this and realize it doesn't work. And that may be at that point another decision point for the legislature to make, perhaps even with a recommendation from the BOG.
I want to be very clear, because that's not what I said. I did not, this is not a question of should New College exist. Okay?
Okay.
I didn't say that. My question is this strategic plan the way that New College should go forward? Should we be focusing on having a third of the student body be student athletes and spending $100 million for that? Question. Okay? That's part of this strategic plan. That's not the part of the legislature or say, it is this strategic plan, right, sufficient to meet what the legislature asked for, which was detailed descriptions of specific strategies, initiatives, steps the institution will take over the next 5 years to increase student enrollment count while maintaining the high academic standards associated with institutional roles as Florida's designated honors college. And so I have concerns that the focus being on having a student athletic body that high, as well as the focus on other areas in this strategic plan, do not meet the test of making sure that we have the finest honors. It's my opinion.
No, that's fair.
But it's not whether or not New College should exist or not. That's for the legislature. But we are tasked with making sure that what we do recommend is financially sound. As constitutional officers, that is something that we are responsible for doing too.
Well, to the degree I misunderstood you, I apologize.
That's okay.
That wasn't intentional. I think when the question is posed, should we be spending X amount per student? At the end of the day, there are scale differences, and the way I interpret that is, it's a question about whether that investment at New College is worth it. And so I should not have deducted that from what you were saying, but that's kind of how I understood it. I think you're right. The question before us is, do you believe this business plan is the right way forward for New College based on what they've presented? They've presented a plan. It's up to us to decide whether we want to adopt this plan or not. I'm not moved by the issue of athletics because I do think that's a relevant part of the student experience. And I don't think that their percentage of students who are athletes is out of proportion with other honors and liberal arts schools. And in fact, as I mentioned, it's substantially lower than many very well-known, very highly respected baccalaureate institutions. Let me open it up. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes, Governor Good.
They're more just open questions. As I said, I'm going through in my mind some of the
Make
stuff.
sure you're talking to the
So,
mic.
yeah, talk into your
people
mic.
can
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder if a higher percentage of opportunities for athletics draws a different kind of a liberal arts student applicant out of high school.
Absolutely. In fact, I would tell you, Governor, that the number one reason that we were able to eliminate and go 11 percentage points to 76 in student retention was 100% because the student athletes we brought on greater diversity, both racial and gender diversity, which immediately eliminated the toxicity on campus and created a greater culture of unity and a greater culture of us instead of us versus them.
And William & Mary is a state-funded liberal arts school, and so is Miami of Ohio, for instance. I don't know who. I mean, the shining example is always William & Mary. But what do they spend if you try to apples and apples, I mean, you're building the school up. They've got old facilities. If you just look at operating expenses, how do we compare to William and Mary?
They were all included on our original list. It wasn't just a comparison against private schools. It was a comparison against private schools and public schools. You could take the military academies. The military academies are probably 2 times us. William and Mary's are probably close to 2/3 greater. It doesn't matter if it's public or private. Other
William
liberal
Mary's
arts
more, you would
institutions.
say?
Pardon?
William and Mary is more than New College?
Way more. We are. I would say of any school in terms of cost per student, liberal arts, in the category of liberal arts, we are the cheapest, if not one of the cheapest. And I should say least expensive.
Thank you, Governor Good. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Vice Chair. President Corcoran, thank you for the presentation. I have a question. I'm trying to look at this through the context of running a business, right? That's kind of my paradigm here. And if I take a look at a startup company, which is kind of how I'm equating you to what you've done, you've come on to run a startup company, basically. And I think about Amazon, right? Or some of the early tech companies where their cost per customer acquisition, right, is really expensive. And you get to the efficient frontier eventually where spending all that money makes a ton of sense. My question is, have you all looked at when do you get there? And I see the chart here, it goes out to 2028, enrollment gets better. Do you think that at some point, as you get more efficient, as you get closer to that efficient frontier, the amount of risk that you take for the dollars that you spend, does that curve flatten out at some point? And it actually, instead of whether it's 91 or 68, I haven't looked at it, but it's a bigger number than, say, UF or FSU or UCF, we know that. But does that at some point get normalized where you feel like, okay, we're now in a place where it's $28,000 a student. It's probably never going to get down to President Cartwright's $6,000. Maybe it will. But assuming it doesn't, when does that start to happen? Is there that, that cross-section where it starts to become a lot more efficient? Is it 5 years from now? Is it 10 years from now? And then taking a look at what does it cost to get there? Has somebody done that analysis? And maybe and I apologize, it might be in here. I haven't seen it. And maybe when you do that math, you go, oh, okay, it makes a lot of sense. But I'm just curious, has somebody looked at that?
Yeah, we have, and we've done it. We've done it different ways because you can't predict, because we're a public institution. So if any president were to say today, okay, this is exactly what my budget's going to be next year, won't we all have to go through this gauntlet called the legislature and the governor for 60 days when we don't know, in any given year, if you're a big university like some of the ones around the table, they could go up in their revenues in a given year $100 million or more from the legislature. So predicting year 2 is very, very difficult. So what I did is I said, okay, let's say we just grew by 3% a year. Or let's say we grew and we had a massive infusion in year 1 or year 2, and then we flatlined. And all those scenarios, we dropped down to as low as in the $50,000 per student to the 65 range per student. But that is a very low cost for a liberal arts school if you're going to stay in that $1,500 to $2,000 realm. Again, if the policymakers say, we like this idea, but we'd like you to get down to $40,000, but we want you to go up to 5,000 students, that's also doable. The second thing I would say, part of the driver in this last 2 years, we had the massive infusion from the governor and the LBC from the legislature of $15 million. Then we had an additional total of $50 million of this infusion. Part of that is because the deferred maintenance at the university, if you were to take the 20-year history of funding and just did it on percent to what New College got and what the other universities got, we would be the dead last school. They would literally go through years of 0 increases. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Again, that's a policymaker's decision. But we have said, okay, let's have steady growth. Let's go back and fix all of this massive deferred maintenance for a small school. And let's see where we get and where we flatline. But in 5 years, if you get to a 1,200 plus growth and you take either a 3% scenario, you take an infusion or a flat line scenario, we'd be in the ballpark of the 60 to 65,000, even 58,000 to 65,000 cost per student. Which is very, very low.
And that's 2028 with a 1,200 student enrollment.
That's correct.
And do you think that, 2028, it sounds like it's a ways off, it's really not. Do you anticipate that trend continues to 2033 or 2035? It gets more and more efficient as you go along?
100%. And we're already 100 students ahead of that 2028 number.
Yeah.
Or 100 ahead.
Okay, because I think those are two different things. From a legislative funding, and you're right, that can change. You are the Speaker of the House. You know better than almost anybody. Well, actually, you have two other speakers here, so maybe you know as good as the other two guys in the room. But thinking about, how fickle that can be, I'm looking at it less of, is Tallahassee going to give me an extra $200 million this year versus how am I operating the university from an OpEx cost relative to the number of students I'm educating? And that is where I think you have a lot of control. You probably do have still control with the legislature as well somewhat, so I'm not, I'm not discounting that. But I do think that from an OpEx standpoint relative to students, that's where I'd like to focus to say, because I don't mind investing money in something that's new, right? That's the way great things get created. That's why we have, the Magnificent Seven, right? You've got Netflix and Google and Amazon and Meta and everything else. They started out as companies that didn't look so hot at the beginning because they were losing money, a lot of money, and it took years to get there. So I'm okay putting money in, but I just want to be sure that the pro forma, the budget, if you will, looks like it can actually get to something that makes sense, whether it's 5 years or 10 years from now. These universities don't spring up overnight, right? It takes a lot of time. And I know you know that. So I want to be sure that we're focusing on OpEx per student, that type of cost versus, hey, what's Tallahassee going to do next year?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, we are. I just
Okay.
want to, last thing, Governor Levine, because 2 points. One is part of the massive infusion of money that we've gotten from the legislature is almost exclusively for housing. Because we've had this massive spike in enrollment, we don't have beds. So we're begging at the generosity of USF for 100 beds. We had to bring in Portable for $3 million for beds, and we had to use a hotel last cycle for $12 million. The legislature is saying, and the policymakers, will give you that money because the growth is what we want. But that's driving up our per student costs and the immediate factor. Once we get out of hotels, we get out of portables, and we have our own student housing, those costs also go down. But the product that's resulted from a liberal arts degree, that forced dynamic when you don't have TAs, when you have an average classroom of 20 instead of over 100, when you have 28 hours of faculty student time versus 2 hours at a university, all those are national statistics. It produces a different product. And the evidence of that is we lead this university system in per capita PhDs created, and we lead it in Fulbright scholars. Something magical happens when you have that. That's why I think it should always be in the repertoire of a state. There should always be an elite liberal arts college because it does produce something. And if we won't do
President
it.
Corcoran,
but
I'm
if
sorry to interrupt. I have to interrupt you. Chair Lamb has to step out for a minute, but he wanted to make a comment. So forgive me. We'll pick back up in a second.
So I'll be brief. I apologize. I have to step out for a matter. I have read the plan. I have spent time with President Corcoran, a lot actually. This is not easy. Right? I'm in the business of turnarounds. I'm in financial services. I see distressed assets every day. And this is not easy. And for anyone that thought this was going to be easy or traditional glide path or probably not be overly appealing on every metric, we shouldn't be surprised. I think I hear and see a lot of the right actions happening. I am not happy with what it costs to be here. President Corcoran's been very clear he's not happy, and that he's running as fast as he can around that. And so I'm supportive of where you're headed. I'm supportive of what you're doing. I know it's hard. I think if you lay what you're doing next to the other 11 institutions, you're going to see outliers, which is what we're seeing. But we knew about that. I think the other important point that I would just call out here is, at the end of the day, we are looking for outcomes. And we haven't actually talked a lot about that. You've got it in here, but getting your students through the university, performing at a high level, driving the outcomes that are in performance-based funding, driving the outcomes that we are looking at in accountability plans, I'll be brutally, I'm almost more focused on that. And that's really the commitment I hear you making, is we're going to drive outcomes for our students, principally. That's who I'm representing in this room right now, taxpayers and students. So based on the plan and the commitments you've made, the vast majority we've seen before, right? Like, I think we've talked about this a few times. I'm supportive of where we're headed. I'm sorry I've got to step out, but like, this isn't going to be an easy glide path. And by the way, for students, and faculty, and anyone watching and listening, you just saw the very definition of what we want to have around civil discourse. and debate. So that's what we do in this room. We're not always going to agree. We're not always going to see things exactly eye to eye, but we're going to do it in the right way, and we're going to get everybody's opinions and ideas on the table. So I appreciate the feedback and the idea that you're putting topics on the table. I love that. And we actually ask everyone to do it. So right when everyone thinks this is awkward, no, this is exactly what we should be doing, to talk about issues and get them on the table. So thank you. Thank you for the discussion. I think I'll let you carry the rest of the meeting, and that's where I stand on it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't have an opinion on the strategic plan of New College by any means. I would just say, given our proximity to New College and the partnership that we already have with housing, we're happy to look on our end if there's ways that we can be helpful to President Corcoran and to New College with regard to some of these costs. I think there's opportunities for us to work together and try to find ways to generate efficiencies for both institutions. So if there's a role we can play as a fellow institution that is right down the street, we're happy to be a willing participant in that process.
In fact, Chair Weatherford, that's one of the topics I wanted to bring up. I would like you to do it. I'm formally asking you to do it.
Congratulations.
I'll take that as an order, Mr. Chairman.
We're formally asking you to do it. All 12 of the institutions, you're in this together. There's assets that you have, there's strategies that you have, there's talent that you have. We've got to help the work that's happening at New College. We've got to help make this work, and we've got to do it the right way. I think Eric Szilagyi's heart's in the right place around driving for the right outcomes. So, Chair Weatherford, if you don't mind, I would like for you and President Corcoran to think of some bold ideas that can help us bend the curve on them being successful faster.
President Corcoran, forgive me for interrupting you, but
I'm good.
The chair had, okay. Any other questions? We're still in questions. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer, and what I would say is...
Unknown participant is now joining.
Okay. What I was going to say is, look, I'm going to support this today. The one thing I would say is I want to stay focused on that cost as we get closer to that efficient frontier of risk and capital. I think that it can flatten out in a good way, not flatten out in a bad way. And congratulations to Will for helping you get there now. This is going to be great. Thanks, Will. But I do think that those types of things, what just happened right here live, unscripted, much to Will's chagrin, is these are the things that are going to get things more efficient. So we got 11 other universities in the system. If we can work to make sure that we do get to that efficient risk investment, crossroads, that's where I want to focus on, is as we get bigger, you should get better, right? We should get better at OpEx. We should get better at policies. We should get better at sports teams or whatever it is. But we should always make sure that we're striving to get more efficient. And I hear you saying that, so look, I'm going to support it. And I think I really appreciate Governor Szilagyi's questions. I think they're the right questions to ask. And we should think about them, not just now, but as long as we're coming back. Because look, this is just $15 million, right? There's a lot more wood to chop. There's a lot more money coming down this pike. And I expect this debate to continue every time we're going to go and take that next step to get bigger, to get better, to get more efficient. So this is not the end. I think this is the beginning. And hopefully 20 years from now, we're going to look back at this meeting and say, geez, we had a trailblazer. We had a new president that stepped in and really tried to make a difference and change the dynamic. And I think you're doing that. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still in questions.
I've got, I heard the comment, $90,000 a student as a cost. I wonder what that's based on. Is there that including, I don't suppose it's including capital cost and deferred maintenance that's being taken care of and that sort of thing. Is that
I can answer that question since that's my number. That's correct. It doesn't include capital investment. It doesn't include, what it includes, it is a calculation of the appropriations for fiscal year 23-24 of, I'll give you the exact number so everybody can do their math, $66,585,987 that New College received, and at the end of that year they had 732 students. Now, to the President's Corcoran's point, they now have more students. We also don't know exactly what all the fiscal numbers are going to be. So I went with the last data that I have. I didn't include this $15 million. I didn't include a projection of other capital expenditures. There's always a lot of moving pieces. But what I did do is I tried to be fair the president's point again, these change every year, as they do for all 12. So when I did the comparative analysis, I did the number for each university based on the number of students they had at the same time, based on the appropriations they received from the state at the same fiscal year. So it is an apples to apples comparison that is dynamic insofar as that every year the appropriations change and student enrollment changes slightly.
Yeah.
And so, I just tried to get an apples to apples because I wanted to get a sense. And then I did a system average where actually I kept New College in the system average. It's small. It still moved it up a little bit, but to get to $10,578 is our system average per student. I looked at Florida Poly during the exact same time to get their number, which is $45,000 a student, so half of what New College is. That's how I got to the numbers. I'm not trying to skew it one way or the other. It's just math.
I think Governor Szilagyi was simply trying to come up with a static comparison point. I think that those numbers, to the president's point, may also include non-recurring funding as well as recurring funding. So I don't know that the 90,000 per student is the number. The university has or the college has, I think, a $68,000 number. Somewhere in there, you got to reconcile the difference. But
Can we get staff to just, look, this, to your point, it's just math,
yeah.
right? Math is math. It doesn't change typically.
And it's when you snap the line.
Right.
Right? It's math when you snap the line. Fiscal year 23, 24, fiscal year 24, 25. What are you going to include?
Whatever that number is, the point being is there's a gap between the average expenditure per student and what New College costs. That's the point that you're making.
That's just the point. It's just representative to give us an understanding that there is a wide gap, right? And then there's lots of other ratios that I went and looked at. How many administrators per student? How many faculty per student? And, because faculty a student, to your point, that is a real benefit in your view, and I would generally agree. I don't know that having 4 times the number of administrators per student is a real benefit, but maybe there's a reason that you need to have a lot more administrators given all the changes you've gone through. I don't know. But, I tried to see, it's running a business, Governor Jones, to your point. I tried to look at what are the different metrics as you look at running a business. Where do you spend your money?
Eric, we're in questions right now. We're not, so we'll get to the debate. I just want to keep this thing going. So I think these are important points, and they're not lost on anybody, particularly me. So
I was just trying to answer Ed's question.
Yeah.
2 things. First of all, I want to make sure that President Cochran knows that I think all of us, and I know I do, has been performing an excellent, courageous, and resilient job at doing what you're doing. And I really appreciate it. And I think it's the kind of effort that could make almost any business succeed. So my questions have nothing to do with that. But it does seem to me that there could be a lot to be done working on these numbers. For about 20 years, I've been on the Board of Directors Executive Committee for a 1,400 student liberal arts college in Ohio where I went to school. And I'm a big believer in liberal arts because I took English literature and had a wonderful career that I've enjoyed in a lot of things that didn't have anything to do with English lit. But I believe in the liberal arts school. But I think, for example, our card rate is about $50,000 a year for a student. But by the time we're through with scholarships, we're probably generating about $25,000 or $26,000 a year for a student, and we're going into our funds, several million to make up the difference because what we get from the students doesn't quite get us there. The other thing that makes it, so that's really a low number compared to what we're talking about, but I think the state of Florida, it may be great policy to fund a more extraordinary liberal arts college, but I'm just saying that, so I'm not putting that out as a benchmark. And we've done a lot of things to cut costs in the last 10 years to continue to make it feasible. And it's a slippery slope. I think it's typical in education. I think we've seen in our system, if we're not paying attention, we're using deferred maintenance as a funding mechanism, because most businesses, necessary maintenance is a cost every year. But that's what we've done at this liberal arts school. So we've got huge amounts of deferred maintenance. So I just think when we look at the whole picture, we need to think about the operating cost and think about the capital cost. And I think it deserves a lot more attention, because I agree with you, Governor Saligi. I think it just seems like an enormous amount of money per student, but I think it's and I know it's a policy issue, and I think we've heard that this is something the state wants.
Well, I'm going to defer to the members of the committee. We're obviously in debate now, so no more questions. Any debate? Any more debate? Okay. We have a motion.
So moved, Frost.
We have a motion, Governor Jones, and a second, Governor Frost. Now into discussion. In debate. Any more?
If we vote for this, we're spending $15 million, but do we get more discussion or more approval as we move to $350 million?
Well, if we approve this, and staff can correct me, that authorizes staff to go get the $15 million that was appropriated by the legislature. We then have to go back, we have to get a quarterly update that we have to share with the legislature, which I presume they will use to determine whether they want to invest any additional funds. So that we're not authorizing $200 or $300 million. We're approving a plan that they will have to go back to the legislature and demonstrate that they're complying with the plan, and it's up to the legislature to decide whether they want to fund it or not. Did I state that correctly, Chancellor?
I believe that is.
Yes.
Good. Okay.
You know, I wanted to table it, but my understanding is we don't have the option. We have to vote yes or no. I would have voted to table it, not because I don't think we should have it, but I think we should understand it better if we will, and understand if we can help with cost. So my thought is, if this commits us to $15 million, but there's more opportunity to work with President Cochran and to see what we can do to make it more efficient, then I'd vote for the $15 million.
Procedurally, there's a motion and a second on the floor. So that's correct, Governor. You'll need to vote for or against the motion. If the motion fails, then we can talk about if we want to take up any other motions. But right now, there's a motion to approve. All right, there's question's been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye. Opposed?
Okay. All right, we'll show the motion adopted, and we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Before you move on, just one point. The timing of the quarterly report.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
The timing of the quarterly reports don't necessarily coincide with our committee meetings. So we were hoping that we could delegate the submission of those to the chancellor, and he can in turn submit those to the legislature as required by the proviso.
Do you need formal committee action for that, or do you?
We were hoping to get
All right,
that.
I would
yes.
accept a motion delegating to the chancellor the authority to submit the quarterly reports to the legislature and governor as required in the proviso. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Frost.
Frost moves. We've got a second, Governor Oliva. Any discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, Governor Oliva, this is the Budget and Finance Committee.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Second, Governor Jones. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
Aye.
Okay, show it adopted. All right.